Man got that car, that license for their ass. My man legal took that glick on him.
Yeah, give me shit back.
Give me shit back. Hold on, we gotta record him giving it back. Look, give that back to him. Stupid bitch. Y'all look dumb as hell.
All right. So I just finished. I didn't think I was going to finish it today, to be honest. Uh, the Supreme Court, New York v. Bruen case, reading the opinion or the ruling. And what I want to say, first thing I want to say before I start is, so I listened to it because I was like 135 pages. I was like, I doubt that I have the attention span, for that right now. So I just had it playing in the background, listened to it, and let me tell you something. The iPad for reading out loud, long documents is horrible. That damn thing stops so many times. You can't get it to start where you want it to start. It's the most annoying device ever. Like I mean, maybe I need to get like a Kindle or something like that. Just something that just reads it and just continues reading it and don't stop until I tell you to stop. So annoying. But anyway, so the New York v. Bruen case about this whole concealed carry tearing down all these blue state, because none of this stuff exists in red states. Again, Democrats are so out of sync with the rest of the country, it's insane. And all of their arguments fall apart. I mean, they make just the most nonsensical argument when it comes to uh, the narrow scope of what this case was about, which is about uh, concealed carry outside the home, not open carry outside the home, concealed carry outside the home, which is essentially the regulation. And let's start off with Thomas, right? So, you know what's so funny? And I've been saying this for a while. Clarence Thomas needs to be given his due by the black community. And this is the stupid ass, like, radical leftist ideas. And I'm not saying that, Clarence Thomas does things that, the black community always agrees with. Although I can't think of many examples. Y'all would have to point out some examples to where black, as it pertains to decisions that Clarence Thomas makes, the black community is like scoff. Y'all been watching too much MSNBC and CNN. But Clarence Thomas, over the years, ever since like the 80s, it's always been, oh, Clarence Thomas, he's not a real black man. Clarence Thomas is a coon. Clarence Thomas, he's Republican. He's an Oreo. He's this, that, and the third. He married a white woman. Everybody going crazy. Man, I swear, Hotep should be shedding a tear for Clarence Thomas, because the way Clarence, the whole thing starts off with Clarence Thomas. He goes in. He's been waiting to do it. You know what I mean? His boy Scalia died and everything, and these are the two main people that are like, the Second Amendment is not to be treated as a second class right. The courts have been treating the Second Amendment like it's a pariah. He's been bitching about that for a while, and reading what he had to say in the majority opinion, right? And he's the first one to speak, and he just lays it out. He goes ham on black codes. He goes ham on Jim Crow. His whole section is calling out the system of white supremacy. I mean, just everything. Black people wanting to defend themselves, and he's got cases and shit in there that I've never even heard of. He's got historical events and, Texas and African Americans arming themselves all over the place that I didn't even freaking know about. He actually brought up my personal favorite, which is the Dred Scott case with what's his name? Racist Justice, Supreme Court Justice Taney. He's the one that basically was like, well, if we recognize these Negroes as citizens, then they'll be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights and bear and carry their firearms wherever and however they move about. He was just going crazy with the shit, right? Which highlights the fact that once you go from becoming chattel labor and a slave to a citizen, that the Second Amendment applied to you as an individual, and that was his fear. And his whole argument was the white man, the black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect, right? I mean, you got to go read the Dred Scott case or go on YouTube and pull up. Again, you're in the hub of information. Just go on YouTube, type in the Dred Scott case, and you'll hear all you need to hear about the Dred Scott case. Okay, so basically, he was against freaking African Americans being seen as citizens because then they could sue and vote and own property. Again, listing off all the rights, including exercising their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. That was kind of like the to scare all the white folks that he like threw in there. And aside from being able to vote, these Negroes will be able to walk around carrying guns. Do you want that? Right. Again, white people's fear of black reprisal for slavery. So, Justice Clarence Thomas, he brought that up, right, and highlighted that, and that kills two birds with one stone. That destroys the militia argument because black people were chattel labor at the time that the Second Amendment was written. They were nothing more than property. And then the minute that they become freed, Justice Tanning, makes the statement during the Dred Scott case that, well, if we recognize them as citizens, they'll be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, which highlights the fact that it has nothing to do with the militia, despite what the left wants to run around and say. On top of the fact that the Second Amendment, it doesn't say the right of the militia, it says the right of the people, not the right of the militia, the right of the people, right? So, he just knocks it out the park with it. He's going in on black codes. I cannot express to you enough just how much Clarence Thomas is going in on black codes. All the sort of, like he sees right through it. Alito sees through it too. They see right through the bullshit, all the tricks and everything that they're going to do. In terms of, basically saying, even preemptively smacking it down, the idea that, we're going to make all of New York a safe space, or a sensitive place, smacks that down. What else does he smack down? Again, the whole, intermediate scrutiny. No, you got to use strict scrutiny, meaning if you're violating people's constitutional rights, then it's unconstitutional, as opposed to, well, let's do intermediate scrutiny where we have this balancing act between public safety and the individual's rights. Right, which basically is the government, the liberal governments just use that as, carte blanche to just go out here and basically just do whatever they want to do. Just at every time they just say, oh, well, public safety, you lose your rights. Public safety, the answer is no. Public safety. And again, bringing up Clarence Thomas, bringing up the fact that all these laws were created, and they were racist laws. They were created to deny African Americans access to firearms. And he's like, we putting a stop to this bullshit. Then comes Alito. Now Alito comes in, and Alito is he's going after freaking Breyer's like hard, because Breyer's and Breyer writes this long ass freaking dissent, right? So in the dissent, it might as well be MSM or CNN. Just conflating statistics. There's 43,000 gun-related deaths. I'm like, you do realize, what is it? People are saying 62%. Last time I checked, it was 67% of gun related deaths are suicides. And then see, we all know the typical talking points, all the and guns and the children and all this other stuff. And Alito, I mean, he does it straight up Captain Solo style, because Captain Solo is so Captain Solo style. That's not the question that's being asked. You're bringing up shit about suicides and everything, and then Alito goes in, and Alito's like, basically, what the hell does concealed carry have to do with people committing suicides? This is about people being able to take the firearms that many of them already possess and be able to exercise that Second Amendment right outside the home. What does a person exercising their Second Amendment right outside the home have to do with suicides? Nothing. Nothing. What are people committing more suicides outside the home? That doesn't even make sense. I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is a slaughter. This is a slaughter. And then he brought up the whole Tops supermarket, pointing that out, saying, New York's got all these freaking laws, and that didn't stop that from happening. But you damn sure prevented African Americans in the Tops supermarket from being able to defend themselves from something like that happening. I'm like, oh man, I'm like, this is a slaughter. This is a slaughter. But just highlighting, how much we're addressing concealed carry here. That is what we're addressing. You're bringing up all this shit with the children and minors and gun deaths and everything. It's like that has nothing to do with this question. Hell, a child that's a minor isn't even lawfully capable of freaking exercising his Second Amendment right. So why are you bringing up those, in other words, it's just trying to bring up all angles of gun violence and everything else that has nothing to do with the legal authorized carriage of a firearm outside the home. People who go through the process and get the permits and everything else. And like I said in my other previous video, liberals, they're the ones that, background checks, and we got to check the fillings in your teeth, and we got to check, your childhood background and your what do you call that? Your juvenile record, and we got to check your mental health and everything. Okay, do all that. Run that shit. Run it. And at the end of the day, nobody still doesn't qualify. Everybody doesn't qualify. Unless you are well connected or something like that in New York. Again, it's an elitist system. That's how they have it set up. So I'm like, so let me get this right. So you have this process. You're trying to get the whole rest of the country background checks and all this other shit. You're trying to get the whole rest of the country, on that, even though we already have background checks with the NICS checks, but you want more background checks, So, which is really, they just want to end private sales, if we want to be clear. That's what the universal background checks are. They want to end private sales in all the states that actually have private sales, because the federal government can only regulate interstate commerce. They can't regulate commerce within a state. Right. But some states have their own laws, like in New Jersey, they made it recently where everything has to go through a transfer in FFL. Before it was you could I think you could sell long guns, but now even long guns have to go through a transfer, or even relatives and stuff like that. Right. So, again, they're just trying to box people in, and then they try to make these broad claims, like Breyer does, these broad claims that all of this contributes, all these regulations contribute to, a safer society, right? And again, I still have to ask the question of why is it that liberals only start screaming when the law-abiding person starts shooting back? Then it's all these scenarios of, what if they hit the old lady, and what if they, hit this other person, and what if the bullet just, keeps going, like the movie Wanted or something like that. Like, they make all these bullshit ass arguments, but when the criminals are running around committing violence, their only answer is, well, we need more gun control, which still leaves the law-abiding people defenseless. But anyway, I don't want to get, into my, freaking tirades and shit. But Alito's response. I mean, it was type funny. I don't want to go back and dig through the document and try to find out some of the read it word for word. But I'm telling you, he was coming for Breyer because he's like, these arguments don't make any sense. We're talking about concealed carry, and you're over in the weeds, talking about, all this other stuff. Like, what is concealed? He's like, if somebody has a gun in their house, like, again, what's stopping them from committing suicide? We're talking about having a gun outside the home. We're not talking about a person actually getting access to a fire. This isn't about the access to a firearm. This is about the ability to take the firearm which you already possess outside the home to be able to defend yourself outside the home. And they're making arguments about like as though we're transitioning from people who don't have guns to people who have guns. Even if you don't have a concealed carry permit, you can still possess a gun in your house. So again, all the people that have guns currently in their house, there's nothing stopping them from going out there and doing whatever with all the liberals feel. There's nothing stopping them, from doing that. And they have, and again, the overwhelming majority of them, haven't done that and aren't going to do that. Like Alito said, it's like what they're concerned about is a what do they say, is not even statistically significant. And that's a key thing, because they keep, they bring up the whole statistics and numbers and all this other stuff. But like Breyer and again, just like the left and the MSNBC and everything, they bring up statistics that have nothing to do with what's at, like what's on the table. Like, it's hilarious. So then you have who was next? I think it was Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh was he just kind of like, he was on the concurring side. He was just kind of like, yeah, basically I agree with everything that's being said, but also I would like to state that, this doesn't mean that people can't have like states can't have licensing and regulations on, gun permits, but it has to still be in sync with the majority of other states. Like, it still has to be in sync. Like, and that was another thing. Like, they preemptively struck. It's past tense, right? They preemptively struck on a lot of things. Like, again, the whole, you can't make all of New York a safe space. You can't come up with the obnoxious, like example, like certain things are automatically going to be unconstitutional if New York even tries it, like making fees like $1,000 or something like that, because the whole aspect of it is to make it so that the average New Yorker is able to exercise that right. And so, average, basically, if we're going with, even with the term average, it would literally mean, the majority of people, at least 50% or more of the people in the city of New York. It'd have to be, we're smack dab in the middle of the bell curve. That's where it would have to be. If you don't have that, then clearly, this is the new poll tax, which is something that I talked about, that I'm concerned about, because the left is not just going to lay down and, they're going to try to pull all type of bullshit, and there'll be more litigation, and there'll be more going back and forth in the courts. There'll be more of this bullshit. I'm telling you, there's just going to be more of it. And then you got to wait a couple more years, and it's got to go through the course. Unless they speed the, rush this shit through, like, that's what it's going to be. And then you have the whole aspect of the lower courts, pulling their shit together and reevaluating many of these cases there's so many cases that are just sitting on the back burner waiting for the decision of this case, so that the lower courts can determine whether they use strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny. And this is going to, like I said, this is going to apply to assault weapons. This is going to apply to, or as I like to call them, defense rifles. It's going to apply to defense rifles. It's going to apply to, standard capacity magazines, not large, standard capacity magazines, all of that stuff. All that, again, if they got to go strict scrutiny, all that stuff is going away. 10-round magazine ban, that's going away. Assault weapon, attacks on assault weapons, quote unquote, that's going to go away. All this bullshit is going to go away. Then you had Amy Coney Barrett. I think she was like kind of responding to Breyer as well. She didn't say too much of anything. She just kind of was like, oh, I concur. And then talked about some of like the regulatory stuff, kind of like Kavanaugh did about, and she reaffirmed because something that Breyer said something to the effect of like reinterpreting the Constitution or something like that, and she shot that down in her segment, and then that was it. And then because Breyer's dissent is just all Breyer. It's not even, the other two women. It's not Sotomayor. It ain't nothing from Sotomayor. There's nothing. Who's the other Supreme Court justice? I forget the other lady. You know, but that's it. It's 3-6. So there really isn't much on the dissenting side. But Breyer's section is long. It is long. But it just all sounds like MSNBC talking points, but it has nothing to do with the case. And that's what Alito was getting at. Everything you're saying, all these statistics that you're throwing up have nothing to do with the question at hand. Which is whether whether people have the right to carry a firearm outside the home. And what is the, history and text as it pertains to that. And they were shooting down all these, liberals, they were going out trying to find these obscure laws with towns out in the Midwest, before they were even towns, before it was even a state. Like it was just like a territory. They're just going way back, in these, like Louisiana Purchase type territories, trying to find these like laws. Oh, you gotta, check your gun at a saloon, and just weak shit, but nothing substantial that was recognized underneath, the U.S. federal government, or even at a state level, because these weren't states; they were like territories and shit. Nah, the whole thing is just, the whole thing is just kick ass. Just going through it. I don't want to make this video too long. But yeah, all that talk about Clarence Thomas and he's Uncle Tom and again, just read the shit. Start at page like 50 or 52. 52 is when he got into talking about Taney and Dred Scott case and everything. He just started out. Freed slaves, all that stuff in there. And I'm gonna tell you Breyer's bitch ass. Breyer comes in there and he starts talking about minorities and how they're so much more affected, and young black men and they're affected by all this gun violence and everything. Again, not bringing up any aspect of the the economics, and that's what pisses me. That kind of pissed me off, because I'm like, y'all can do all this research. Y'all can do all this research when it comes to, just the generalized gun deaths. This is coming from the left. But when it comes down to doing the homework for why is the black community disproportionately affected by gun violence? Again, are we going to bring up the decades long of discrimination, Jim Crow, redlining, blockbusting, urban renewal, eminent domain, the dumping of narcotics into the black community by Ronald Reagan and the Iran Contras, freaking J. Edgar Hoover and his attack on black leadership like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, COINTELPRO? Are we going to bring up any of those things? The Richard Aoki, the rounding up of the Black Panthers? Are we going to bring up any of that stuff? Deindustrialization of America, right? Are we going to bring up the RICO charges, the 1994 crime bill that came underneath Joe Biden? Are we going to bring up any of that stuff as to why you have high rates of gang-related gun violence in the black community, in conjunction with what does that have to do with legal, lawful, concealed carrying? Again, like Alito said, it's not statistically significant. If you have one or two assholes that have a concealed carry permit, like that situation in Philly, I think one or two of those guys had concealed carry permits. The shit on South Street where it was a shootout, it wasn't a mass shooting, they were shooting at each other. Yeah, and they got arrested and they got charged, and they will face the full consequences of violating the law, even with their concealed carry permit. Because even though they have a concealed carry permit, which allows them to possess a firearm outside the home, that doesn't mean that you get to blast at your ops with the backdrop of a crowd of people. That doesn't mean that you get to recklessly endanger other people. No, you will be arrested and charged. Again, we have no problem arresting and charging, citizens that conceal carry. But for some reason, when it comes to cops that, break the rules and break the law and everything, oh no, we can't do, we still can't get Joe Biden to pass a crime bill on police when it comes to that shit. But I mean, this is, again, I mean, it was just all type of MSNBC coming out of Breyer's mouth, man. I mean, just all type. I mean, it was like, and you could kind of tell, like, I'm like, bro, you didn't really write this shit. You didn't write this shit. Like, this is like, you got a bunch of like paralegals and shit, to run around and get you all this information, go get, grabbing stuff from freaking, the Brady campaign and, the Giffords group or whatever it's called, Moms Demand Action, all these really skewed statistics. And Alito called that out. Like, we can see that these statistics are biased. And again, going back to, the fact that, 43,000 gun related deaths. Again, the topic of the conversation is not about suicides, which are, again, in the 60 something percent of all gun related deaths. And again, Ray Ray and Pookie running around the black community with their gang-related narco economy is not what's in question. What Ray Ray and Pookie is doing with their illegal guns, already breaking New York's laws from go, is not what's in question. What's in question are whether law-abiding people who've already gone through the background checks, people who have no criminal history, people who've never been mentally adjudicated, whether they're able to go outside of their home and protect themselves with their firearms, especially with the recent spike in crime, due to being a spinoff of the crashing economy due to high gas prices, the war with Russia, the freaking COVID on the tail end of the pandemic, so many people losing their jobs, all this I've covered. But I'm like that again, like just bringing in all this noise into the conversation that does not speak to the question at hand. I mean, and I'm like, man, Breyer needs to just go. Even the arguments that he made the first time back in like October, where he was like, and I believe he sounded like Barney, and I believe that two people at a football game, they can get pretty angry at each other, especially if alcohol is involved. There isn't a stadium I know, even in states that have concealed carry, where you can walk into a stadium with a concealed carry permit. There isn't a stadium that I know that you can do that at, where there's alcohol and drink and booze. I'd argue probably 50% of states have some regulation, on that. I know, for example, in Florida, they have a regulation where you can go into a restaurant, you can go into the eating area, but you can't go anywhere near the bar. That sort of thing. So, and I don't advise for people drinking and carrying firearms. I think I like Florida's law, where it's kind of like, if you're drunk and you have the gun on you, you can have it on you. But if you pull out for any other reason other than self-defense, your ass goes to jail. Plain and simple. You know what I mean? So you can have it on, you can drink in your own yard, you can, go whatever a park. You can't be at a bar, but you can go about and do whatever. But, if you pull it out and you're intoxicated, your ass is going to jail. That's how they do it down in Florida. But other states have different laws. Other states, you can't even go into a bar. I think Pennsylvania is like that. You can't even go into a bar. I think you can go to the eating area, but like, I think it's like, if the restaurants does more than 50% sales and alcohol, then you can't go in there. Something like that. Don't quote me on that. I think I don't know if Ohio is the same way. trying to think if Ohio's the same way. I know how Ohio has it to where, those signs that you use. And I saw one of these, I don't know, police chiefs or whatever. And these New York police are such bitch asses. They're unlike any of the other cops in the rest of the country. All the rest of the cops, they deal with this situation. They don't do this whole one size fits all, where they can assume, well, if you have a gun, it's illegal. That's the New York Police Department is going to have to be completely retrained when it comes to this. And same with New Jersey and California, many of these other states, because they're trained right now. Their whole brain, all these law enforcement officers in New York, Massachusetts and freaking Maryland and California and New Jersey, all these officers, their whole mentality is geared towards, I see gun, I see criminal. I see gun, I see criminal. And if you ask me who's going to go out here fucking up, it's going to be law enforcement. Law enforcement is going to be the one that's fucking up. And they may and there may be another Philando Castile situation where they end up shooting a person that legally is able to carry a permit just because they look a certain way. Just like that clip with that brother that should look like it was in D.C., but I don't think that they had that ruling yet. But anyway, the one where the brothers at the street are standing outside and they basically pulled one of the brothers out of the crowd, and he was like, my man got that license for their ass. I love the way that brother says that shit. My man legal. My man got that license for their ass. You know what I mean? Just clowning them. I'm like, yes, we need to see more of that. That's what we need to see more of. You know what I mean? All this, well, if you dressed appropriately like it was the 1950s on Leave It to Beaver, then maybe you wouldn't be profile. Fuck that. No. If niggas want to wear baggy jeans and white tees and all that other stuff, again, it needs to be a standard. It needs to be standard understanding that black people around here carry legal. And that's something that has to change in the Northeast. That's already changed down south and whatnot. Cops can't just go around assuming, with their biases and shit like that. But I'm saying that has to change up north. That has to change up north because, again, New York cops are the worst. They're the worst, because they don't like the idea of being challenged. And again, this isn't about challenging New York police officers, but some of them are some straight dickheads. Some of them, they run around New York and they act like they're little mob cartel, as the police department, catering to the wealth and rich people, of Manhattan. That's literally what it is. Manhattan is Hunger Games. Okay, that is what Manhattan is. That's why you're seeing all the shit. They got all type of millions of dollars to throw around at media companies and everything else to get their goddamn way. But see, the thing is again, the people have spoken. The 2A community on YouTube has spoken. Because before, it's easy to control the narrative when you have, only 3 networks and, they can go up there and say whatever. Hey, I remember growing up and as a child and, everything that you saw on the news, like you thought that shit was, 100% legit. It wasn't as opinionated as it is now. But again, after, right around 2013, Sandy Hook and all that, fully semi-automatic, I'm like, why are y'all lying? And then you catch them in more lies and more lies and more. I'm like, yo, why do you have to lie about something if it's really about public safety? Why do you have to intentionally misconstrue and conflate information? Again, conflate, the criminals that are already running around carrying their guns illegally with people concealed carrying. You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you have to conflate the two? Why do you have to act like and sit up there and pretend like people having concealed carry permits is just the wildest thing in the world, and they're always making references towards Texas. I'm like, you do realize 43 other states, which is the majority of states. We only have 50 states in this country. So the majority of states have some form of shall issue, meaning if you're not a mentally adjudicated person, or if you're not, freaking prohibited, right? If you're not a domestic abuser, if you're not a convicted felon, you have the right to carry. What is the concern? And then, the left, they're going to be quick to try to point out, the one-off scenarios of, a domestic, like, in other words, he got the gun because he wasn't a domestic abuser. But then, after 30 years of marriage, they get into a fight and then he offs his wife and offs himself. Like, and then they'll be like, see, I'm like, he had the permit and he had all the guns for 30 years. And then they just, had a bad day. But then that turns into as though he was slapping her up for 30 years, or vice versa. Women taking out men in their sleep, shit like that. Again, these are one-off situations, just like mass shootings are one-off situations. The majority of the gun violence, not gun violence, the gun violence, but the majority of gun homicides in America is black on black. It is 85% of gun homicides is inner city, impoverished, narco economy, drug-related, gang-related violence. That's what it is. The rest of this country is like fucking Disneyland. You know what I'm saying? But no, they don't. No, they want to ignore that. They want to talk about mass shootings. Trying to pull in the heartstrings of white suburban soccer moms and all that shit. You know what I mean? But and just shows like literally, it's like, 20 people died in a school, or even like 20 children died in a school, but freaking 8,000 black youth died from gang-related gun violence, and nobody cares. Nobody bats an eyelash. The niggers are doing it to themselves, right? But yet, when the school shootings happen and it's white on white, I can't say, well, the white people are doing it to themselves. Why should I care? That's how they feel about us. And again, the inner city, drug, narco economy related violence, gun violence, is directly tied to the lack of economics in that environment. Again, I've been asking the question for like the last decade. Please, someone direct me to the upper middle class black kids committing drive-bys. Show them to me. Show me the black kids that are coming from, well-to-do, solid two-parent homes where both parents are gainfully employed. Show me where they're running out here committing crimes. You're not going to see that. It's the damn environment. And before white people jump on, no, it's the culture. Okay, if it's the culture and it's not the environment, let me see you go live in North Philly. Why don't you want to live in I don't want my precious to be affected by what environment? Say it with me now. The environment, exactly. That's why you drive around, honey, let's go over here because they got the best schools over here. Well, why can't they get straight A's at this shitty school over here? Well, I don't want my kids to be subjected to those kids. Why? I mean, if it's all about willpower, if it's all about culture, I mean, clearly if you're raising them with a proper culture in your own home, then it shouldn't matter whether they go to the inner city predominantly black school. It shouldn't matter. No, they'll be affected by the environment. Oh, they'll be affected by the environment. This the same point that we're making about an environment that lacks resources. Yes, everybody is affected by prolonged exposure to poverty. For further examples, I direct you to your nearest trailer park where your more affluent white people don't want to live anywhere near those people. Why not? They're white. They're white just like you. Don't they share the same culture? Apparently not. It's like, no, they most likely do share a lot of the same culture, but they don't have the same economics, which is obviously going to warp and change, how they see the world and view the world, because they can't do the same things that you do. They can't move like you do. They can't hope for the future like you do. They don't have anything coming in like you do. I mean, I don't have to sit there and compare to the white race to the black race to make the point. I can just simply compare wealthy white people to poor white people. And when you go down there in Kentucky, and when you go down there in Tennessee and Memphis and everything, that's where you're going to see, high rates of teen pregnancy. That's where you're going to see high rates of hepatitis C. That's where you're going to see high rates of freaking fentanyl abuse and overdoses and shit like that. Why? Why is that? I mean, they're white too, right? Don't they share the same white culture? Is this all about white racial culture and white racial identity? People are full of shit. But anyway, let me not get on that. But I had another video that I recorded before I did this one. I might post this one first and then go back because I talked about some other things in that one. But this one's a little bit more organized than that one. I was just kind of like, I was in my feels and I was just free floating. But yeah, like, the way that the bases they covered in this case, I've been waiting for a case like this. You know what I'm saying? It's not even like a case like this. No, this is the case. This is the freaking case. And I'm so glad that Clarence Thomas was up there, and Clarence Thomas was able to speak these truths of the historical experience of African Americans that is a pure tragedy in this, just the injustice in this country, and highlight the beauty and the significance of black people protecting themselves, not from a tyrannical government, but from their fellow Americans that wish to do them harm. For nothing more than ideas of racial superiority and the color of one's skin. Just beautiful. Beautiful. Again, I encourage you to read Clarence Thomas's opinion. I encourage you to read it. There's historical, and then look up the stuff that he brings up, because again, there's a whole truckload of stuff in there. I was like, damn. I didn't even know that went down for real. Damn. I'm like, damn. That's what happened. I'm like, shit. I'm like, damn white people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, damn, they did all this fucked up shit. I'm like, man, literally, again, just taking people's guns away so that they can be terrorized by the Klan. He even brought up the Ku Klux Klan. I'm like, where is the coon? Where everybody been running around for the last fucking 30 years screaming that Clarence Thomas is a coon. He's a coon. He's a coon. He's a coon. Read his opinion and you will see how much of a coon he is not. Damn, you would have thought that freaking Robert F. Williams wrote that piece, man. Damn. Anyway, I'm making this video longer than it needs to be. That's all I got to say. That's my video. SWP out.
Man got that car, that license for their ass. My man legal took that glick on him.
Yeah, give me shit back.
Give me shit back. Hold on, we gotta record him giving it back. Look, give that back to him.